This is the Game Changers Experience. Deep dive conversations with leading business disruptors, Olympic athletes, celebrities, entrepreneurs, and influencers from around the world. This show will teach you insights about the winning principles in mindset, productivity, marketing, branding, entrepreneurship, business strategy, and more. Hosted by productivity authority, business strategist, former elite athlete, author, and public speaker, Adam Strong.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Game Changers audio experience with myself, Adam Strong. And today, again, we have another fantastic guest here on the show. We have Dan Norenberg. Now, Dan is the author of Executive Ownership. He is a trusted advisor, consultant, speaker, just to mention a few. And his area of expertise is all about creating highly effective leadership teams. And today we're going to be covering specifically more around, for you guys, the small business owner, we're going to be talking a little bit about what are some of the key ingredients that you need with regards to building teams. We're also going to be talking a little bit about what game changing means, so the game changers concept. We're also going to be talking a little bit about some of the things which is based around ownership, right? What are the things that we need to be part of in terms of what do we need in terms of key ingredients in terms of ownership with regards to building fast and effective teams. So that's what we're going to be covering, guys. Hope you can enjoy the show. And Dan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Adam. It's a pleasure to join you today. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. So interestingly enough, I know that you're American, right? So, when we spoke off air, I think you said that you were from the Midwest, and
yes.
but you're now in Munich, Germany, right? Yeah. Tell me, why Germany? Well, I mean, there's a million places in this world. I wouldn't have thought Germany to be any kind of holiday destination, but what's the story behind that?
Well, let me give you the front end and the back end. So the front end of the story is, I have a background in psychology and criminology, wanted to become a lawyer, thought I better do 1 year in business, moved to California to do 1 year of business, got in that high-tech area, Silicon Valley, got into office automation and photovoltaics, and fell into sort of sales and marketing with two high-growth companies and moved into management very, very soon, and very results-oriented guy in the US. If you get results, they tend to move you up, even if you're not really ready for it. So perhaps some early lessons about how not to lead, I learned very well. And unfortunately, the company that I was with, and I would have stayed there the rest of my life, unfortunately was just before its time. It was photovoltaics before it was really an industry. They went out of business. I had sold my house. My girlfriend and I had broken up. I didn't have any family, any job. And I thought, I always wanted to go to Europe. And I thought I'd take a 9-day trip to Europe and sort of reset myself and come back for my next big thing in the US. And got to Europe and just was really, really exciting. And 9 days wasn't enough. Extended it to 21 days, went through, Paris and Geneva and Stuttgart and Munich. And Munich for me was a little bit like Iowa, as Bill Bryson describes it, it's sort of country here. It's not London. It also has a bit of an international flair. You've got Siemens and BMW, the biotech companies. Absolutely. And that was really like a little bit like California without the beach. And then went back and long story short, just decided to make a go of it here. And that was that 9-day holiday is now on 30 years. So that's the front end of the story. But the back end of the story, which might be interesting because you're one of the leaders in this whole movement of game changing, is what the backstory behind my stay here was that at the end of the trip, as I was back in Paris for my last few days, thinking about going back to the States, and I had a wonderful holiday. The night before I was supposed to fly back to LA, I had this horrific dream. And I saw myself being 80 years old, back in California, pushing the lawnmower with 2.5 kids, 2.5 cars, which is a nice dream to have. But I was haunted by the thought of being, at the end of my life where I couldn't really, there was no time on the clock, really wondering, would I have any regret when I look back to those? I was about 30 at the time. Will I have any regret not spending more time in Europe, perhaps learning a foreign language, perhaps exploring what Europe might offer to me? I love the States, so it wasn't like I was trying to get away from the States. And that thought of regret was so profound for me that the next day I thought, I can't take that flight back to LA. I've got to go back to Munich. Munich just seemed to be where I had a good feeling. And I didn't speak a word of German. I didn't know a single person, and I didn't have any legal work papers, and then was able, through the support of a lot of people over the years, to build a 7-figure consulting company. So for the folks that are listening, that are thinking about, that decision in their life about what to do, what not to do, for me, what's been a real guidance system, internal guidance system about changing my game and changing my clients' game, is probably, as you do too, is I have a real good nose for regret. And I'd like to live a life where I don't have regrets. So I can smell the smoke before I see the fire. And if I think I might regret something, I really consider that a lot deeper. So anyway, a little bit of a background as to what brought me to Munich. And then, of course, later met a wonderful woman who's become my best friend and wife. And we've got a couple kids who are sort of bilingual. And yeah, that's the story.
Love it, love it, love it. Fantastic. Very good. And it's kind of like the fairy tale end to everything. And I love that. It's very good.
It sounds like a fairy tale now, but when you're going through that, when you're taking clients, as we do, through difficult situations, and you're kind of in the middle of it, it's like being in the kitchen of a meal that's only half done. It looks like a mess. You've got flour and food and pots and pans, but then an hour later, when it's on the table, when it's that great Christmas dinner, Thanksgiving, then it's really something wonderful. And for 4 or 5 years, I was sort of in a stage of both being euphoric, like I'm doing something that I'd never done before, to quote William Shatner. But on the other hand, I was like, have I lost my mind? Because I really had to go back to started some very fundamental things. Living in an apartment with college kids, I was 30 years old. I mean, it's just strange. but if you pursue what you really want to do, it's about not being ordinary. And I know that's something that's important to you as well.
Absolutely. Love it. Love it. Love it. Very cool. So interestingly enough, I know that a lot of our listeners are, I suppose the small business owner or the entrepreneur and stuff like that. And I know that you work with, a wide diversity of companies, small and large, in your years of experience in working with effective teams. Now, I suppose my first real question really is, what is the necessary necessary key ingredients that you need in order to put together a high performance team? So if you're very inexperienced leader, or if your company is going through fast growth, and you just haven't maybe mastered the skills in thinking, that person would be a good person, or that person would be a good person. Are there any sort of advice that you have for people that are very inexperienced in growing high performance teams?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think whether you're inexperienced or very experienced, it's still a very challenging game. And I think that I'd say 2 things. Number one is we're still moving. 2 things. Let's say Western Europe, North America, this very individualistic cultures where we're used to having this individualistic hero, the solo leader, knowing it all, build all, and it often can get very, very lonely there. And I think one of the biggest things I would say is to be able to release the burden that you have to do everything alone. Even if you're running a very, very small business, you've got to be able to access and connect with the system around you. That could be clients, that could be people even that work for you, that maybe even are in the management team. So I would say the keys are, don't feel that you have to do it alone. We're also moving from a time 15 years ago. I was speaking to a CEO of a very large organization yesterday in Scandinavia. We were talking about the differences that leadership is, what's taken place in the last 10 to 15 years. 15 years ago, we were still saw a highly effective leader as someone who was maybe more command and control, maybe more knew everything, was driving the business. And even sometimes small business owners who have their vision feel that they've got to carry that on their own. And it's no longer the case. It's more today about being able to connect with people, helping other people be successful, and giving them some leeway and some rope to be able to experiment and maybe even do things a little bit slower than the senior leader might do it. But it's whether you've got a small business or a large business, it's the people around you and how they experience success is what's really going to drive your business success.
Love it. Very cool. That's really interesting. And I suppose I'm also fascinated by the different personalities that you end up working with, and making sure that you have the right people in the right places based on their personality traits. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that it's another question that if you look at highly successful teams, and this is where I maybe a little bit contrary here. If you look at highly successful teams, whether it's cricket or football, basketball, sports, or even business, it's always a wide variety of personality makers, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes leaders will say to me, "Gosh, I'm looking for that team of A players." Mm-hmm. And what I remind them of, I say, go back and look at any successful team, any championship team, in any sport, in any country. And you find that the team is comprised not only of A players, but of B players and of C players. So it's not exactly a answer your question about the personality, but the first thing I want to help leaders recognize is this search for this ideal team of 8 A players is really non-existent. The key is, how do I make the most out of the people that I have? Another tendency that leaders have a tendency to hire people or to bring people on who are like them, right? Because the ego wants to be right. We want confirmation of what we're doing, but it creates a very one-sided leadership. So let's don't confuse differences with, differences are really important for a leadership team. Studies show us time and time again that teams that are homogeneous, so made of similar makeup people, they have a certain, let's say, possibility of success and a certain, risk of failure, but that band isn't very wide. Time and time again, we see the more diverse the teams are in personality, in thinking, in backgrounds, the higher possibility. I mean, the risk is higher if you don't get it right, but if you do get it right, the rewards are much higher. So I think that's what's important is about personalities, just, trying to bring the best out of people and make sure you're exchanging and talking to people to see what's important for them.
True. It's an important. I'm gonna go back to what we talked about in later on in the conversation, because something that really triggered off in something, but I kind of want to move along to something. So, okay. Interestingly enough, I know that we talked about this actually before, like business leaders and also business owners can feel like they have this heavy burden on their shoulders, right? And they're carrying it along with them. You've written a great book, which is all around executive ownership. How can we create that culture of ownership? How can we sort of say, you know what, you're not just here as an employee, you're here to take ownership of your responsibilities. We need to create this cohesion, this synchronicity, or whatever you want to call it. How can we create that culture of ownership?
First of all, the thing about you're in a meeting and you're talking to leaders, and they say exactly what you say. I'd like to create an ownership culture. I'd like to get my employees more involved. I think the first thing we have to recognize is that ownership is not something that we can delegate. Right? It comes on the management agenda. It could be a small business, it could be a middle-sized business, or even a large business. But I've heard so often leaders say, "God, I'd really like to get more ownership in my business," and that's where I've used the word ownershift, because there's a sort of a nuance there.
Love it.
We can delegate responsibility. Responsibility is about clarity and understanding what's expected of me, whether I'm working in a small shop or in a mid-sized business. I know what I'm to do. And responsibility can be something that can be collective, right? We can have everybody in a manufacturing plant being responsible for safety, right? And the next stage of engagement. So responsibility is our first level of engagement. The second level of engagement is accountability. And accountability and responsibility are similar. I can also delegate accountability, but accountability is different than responsibility because it rests with one person. The petty cash box in the office, in the administrative office, there aren't two sets of keys to the petty cash. There's only one set of key, and that's usually the secretary, whatever. It's not the CEO or the general manager, because it's got to be one person accountable. So that we can also delegate. But ownership is different, because ownership is the space of discretionary effort. That means that we have to, as a leader, we have to create conditions of trust, responsibility, autonomy, the ability to make mistakes, the ability to even take a business trip and go visit a customer that I think is in need without having to go up 3 levels in the organization. Those are the conditions that we start to create where people accept an invitation. I want to have more say in what's going on here. I'm willing to do more because it's an exciting environment and I can shape more. And I think that's an important distinction around ownership. People say, I want to create an ownership culture. I say, well, how many people have to sign off on your project manager when he wants to fly to Istanbul to check on his project? And we check it out, and you got to jump through 7 windows. Now, that's another thing. And just one other example there. To what degree, can people say no to me if I'm the boss? I worked with somebody the other day and they said, Dan, nobody says no to me. I don't take no for an answer. And I said, hey, have you heard yourself speak? You know what that's really saying? If people can't say no to you, if they can't negotiate what they do to a degree or understand why it makes sense or be able to prioritize, you're going to get people to do what you want them to do, but you're certainly not going to have ownership.
That's true. And also you're going to piss people off as well along the way.
Yeah. If you're lucky, you'll piss them off, the language, but if you're lucky, you'll piss them off because they don't know they're dissatisfied. What's worse is to have people silently be at low levels of engagement. They're fulfilling the very lowest, criteria that they need to do. So if someone gets upset or angry, that should be a flag for you. Sometimes it's too late, but it's important.
True. Love it. Very cool. Now, interestingly enough, we did fairly sort of scrape the top of this, the icing on the cake. But I know that, and you'll know this from experience working with some of the top leaders of, people that manage billion-dollar companies to even the small business owner. But we're probably in agreement here that it can be lonely at the top, right? It's going to often lead to isolation, depression. It can often lead to a pathway where we wouldn't want to see any business leader or business owner go down. But how does it? I would like to talk about, number one, the reasons why it happens. That's the first thing. And secondly, how does it affect our team performance?
Well, it's like if I have a glass of water, a bowl of water, which represents the team climate, and I either drop an ice cube in or something that's warm, it's going to change the temperature. So whatever temperature or climate or emotional state the senior leader is in, that will have an impact on what's happening in the team climate. So, and we see this sometimes as sort of an example of what you just shared is in senior leaders that, that was sort of pre-COVID, it was sort of cool to be stressed, right? It was sort of cool to be overworked. It was sort of cool to be of a full agenda. It was sort of cool to be back-to-back business trips. So if I'm reporting to a guy like that, who wants to be a part of that?
True.
So I think COVID, with all its tragedy and all its setbacks and the health and the loss of life and everything else, if nothing else, it's helped us to sort of reset what's important. It's allowed us to be authentic and to be, I think, in some degrees, although we're separated sometimes a little bit by distance in the remote working style, it's allowed us to be a little more intimate with each other. And I think that's, extremely important that leaders be very conscious about, what am I carrying into the room? If I'm stressed and I'm overworked, or I'm talking about how busy I am, this obviously doesn't create a climate where people feel they want to perform. So what can I do about that? Well, a great investment is to look at an outside coach, advisor, or sparring partner. The business that we're in, the return of investment of having someone from the outside who's not in your family, who's not in your team, who's not connected to the system, who's solely there to support you to play at your best and to do it in a way that you feel fulfilled, is worth its weight in gold. And that's number one. And number two, because of, I think, what I'm seeing certainly throughout this whole leadership community, the whole professional community, it's now okay to ask for help, or it's becoming, it's more okay to ask for help. So these different peer groups, I also do peer coaching groups that I run. So people from different companies can come together. They meet 3 times a year, either face-to-face or virtually. I think you've got some groups like that too. And to allow leaders a chance to sort of exchange their ideas. And those are 2 very valuable things to do. And then, of course, being active, recognizing that you can't put everything into work. right? You've got to get out and have your run or take your swim or something like that. A good leader is a balanced leader.
It's interesting because I've known people, even clients, maybe not so much now, but where they sacrifice their well-being, their health, which for just living the business dream, right? Whatever that looks like. Oh, but I'm doing it, for my family. I'm doing it for this and whatever it is. But I think we're seeing a shift now in people's attitudes and behaviors with regards to, okay, well, now I feel like I do need to look after myself. But maybe, do you feel like people are becoming more consciously aware of what's happening, not just in the world right now, but also how I can be a better leader?
Well, I think that has to do with as we move through the whole phase of the baby boom to Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z. So that's a part of it where people want a full life and they want to see that also in their leaders as well. And so I think that's a part of it, this balance. And I think that this whole COVID piece has helped us recognize that, I can be at home and still do my business, but I also have to learn when to cut off the business and to move into my family or my private time. So I think it's really, really important because what we're asking, leadership is really about creating followership. It's nothing that I can force. It's like ownership. So in what way do I need to show up in a way that people feel compelled to follow me? And in most cases, what I see today is that leaders that are authentic, that are vulnerable, that not only seek a balanced life for themselves, but also encourage their people to have a balanced life, are people that are exciting and people want to follow them. And also when leaders show an interest in personal and self-development, not only for themselves, but for their teams, is also important. And that can be in a small operation or a medium or large size operation.
Love it. Love it. Very cool. Now, interestingly enough, obviously, as you know, I love talking about, the concept of game changers, right? Or game changing, or whatever it is that you want to call it. Based on our conversation, which is all around ownership and teams, what do you think is the real difference between a game changing team and an ordinary team? What are the big subtle differences in terms of maybe skill sets or the way they behave or the habits? What do you think are, even because I'm a big fan of sport, as you know, so are you. Yeah. I know there's huge correlations between team sport and also how to bring that into business. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, let me focus on leadership teams, because there's business teams, projects teams, and business teams, and there are leadership teams which have a totally different dynamic. There's more weight on their shoulders and things like that. And I see three distinctions. There are three things, and these can apply also to a variety of teams, but primarily my focus is leadership teams. I've worked with 150 of them on 3 different continents. But the really highly effective leadership teams have a very clear and aligned picture about what the future success looks like for their business. And this is really absolutely critical. So they're willing to do the hard work. They're willing to deal with the uncertainty to really forge together to not only create a clear picture, which is not just a series of numbers about 12 or 13%, but about the purpose and meaning of the business, how it's creating value for customers at some point in the future. Right. That's number one. Something easy to talk about, but very difficult to do.
True. Not
only to create the clear, but to create the alignment. That's number one. Number two, the effective teams separated from other teams are that effective teams have a process for continuous improvement in their leadership team. That could be a feedback round. That could be fireside chats. That could be going off-site twice a year, or a meeting even at the pub on Friday afternoon to say, what's happened well this week in our team, not just the business, but in our team, and what didn't work so well, and how can we fix this? So having a continuous process for improvement. And the third thing I would say, because if you can't run continuous improvement in your team, how could you expect to run continuous improvement across the entire business? True. So it starts with the nucleus of the team. And third thing, which is about the leadership teams, is that also often leadership teams, because they have so much on their agenda and they're dealing with all these issues on the dashboard, there is dysfunction. Very few are really working at their very, very best. And they underestimate they underestimate how their dysfunction, the leadership team, how much havoc that causes in the organization. Now, so those are the 3 points I would say. It's about clear picture of the future, have a systematic process for improvement, and number 3, being either naive or not being aware of how those dysfunctions in the leadership team, how much havoc that creates in the organization. And just on that note, if I may, Adam, I recently, there's a recent survey that's out. It's the Executive Develop Associates. They're a US-based group, but they recently surveyed over 1,000 companies, mid-sized, large organizations about leadership. And because of my background with leadership teams, they asked me last year to contribute some questions that would help them tap into sort of what's happening in the leadership team area. Interestingly enough, and these are top companies, 86% of those surveyed, these are thousands of senior professionals in many different industries, 86% said that leadership teams are critical to the success of a company's success. Yet only 17% of those polled said that their leadership teams were highly effective. And only 3% of those polls said they had a systematic approach for continuous improvement in their teams. So whether I'm in a business that is either large, medium, or small, one of the things that I would take out of this conversation is that what's the process for continuous improvement that I have for myself, which I know you're really an advocate of. What's my process for continuous improvement? And for my team, what is our process for continuous improvement? And that doesn't have to be, reinventing every 4 weeks, but are we continually reflecting on what's happened in improvement? Simple example. I'm a guy who's really into fundamentals. I played football also at a collegiate level. And, every year, no matter how good you are, you always go back to the fundamentals. And I think the business meeting, which every business person has to do, the business meeting is the nucleus of a company culture. Yeah. So one of the tools that I introduce to the teams that I work with is at the conclusion of every meeting is simply, and running a good meeting is tough. We know that, right? There's a lot of issues. You've got to run them every week. You got sales meeting, you got business meetings, production meetings, project meetings. But at the end of every meeting, simply take a poll of those present and say, on a scale from 1 to 10, how results oriented was this meeting? That's your y-axis, your right. Up and down vertical axis. How effective was this meeting? How results oriented was it? And people can just rate it. Well, it was a 6, a 7, 8, 10 is very good, 1's not very good. And the second question is, in terms of collaborative climate, the way that we talk with each other, the way we build on ideas, does it feel like a group of Roman gladiators fighting each other in the meeting? What sometimes happens, that's a 1. Or do I leave the meeting being more energized than I came in? That would be an 8 or 9 or 10. And then you look at that interface between the results orientation, the collaboration, and you have a point. It's subjective, of course, but you're doing a little reflection. And then you simply say, what's one thing that we could do to either improve the effectiveness of our meeting or make the climate more collaborative? Even doing that every 2 weeks shows people in the organization we're out to get a little bit better every day. We're out to get a little bit better every day. So those are my reflections on that point.
Love it. That's some good points there. And for you guys that are listening in, by the way, I hope you're making some good notes, because I think what Dan's given you there is and I am a big advocate of continuous improvement and what I call sharpening your axe. Because if you're not sharpening your axe, essentially you're going to be left behind. And there are plenty of examples, not just on an individual basis, but also from a company perspective, of companies that have come in and they've died or literally just barely surviving now. And there are so many great examples of that. And it's all because they haven't actually taken, Dan's advice on board and haven't actually, because they feel like they have all the answers, or they're just living in the present rather than the future. So good points there, Dan. Love it. Very good. Interestingly enough, I do want to talk about, I want to go back to high performance teams and what really keeps a high performance team together in terms of the glue. Because, for me, that really, if you don't have the glue, essentially it's all going to fall apart, really, isn't it? What what's the glue that keeps a high performance team together? Are there any intricacies or any thoughts there, maybe from your book or whatever it might be, that you think, okay, these are the key necessary ingredients that you need to keep that high performance team together?
Yeah, through my work with over 100 executive and strategic teams, I came across some sort of unconventional, I won't call them secrets, but we all talk about having a good strategy or having a clear goal or something like that, the burning agenda, which is all true. However, what I saw that working with teams, what really set the high performing teams apart from sort of the mediocre teams was, number one, a concept that I call resilient relationships. Now, if we think about resiliency, which is, I know, a key topic of yours, but resiliency is the ability to be able to bounce back from a situation. And I recognize this and have documented this also in my book, that resilient relationships mean the ability to be able to have tough conversations, still respectful, but tough conversations with colleagues about what's working and what's not working, and also to be able to provide help, to provide feedback about someone who's not doing something. Now, if I'm in customer care in a business, do I have the ability to go into the sales department and say how maybe their sales approach is creating problems for us in customer care? Do I have the permission to do that in the company culture? And do I also have the skills to be able to do that? So resilient relationships, can I give feedback? Can I be critiqued? Do I ask people for feedback about my performance around the people that work around me? That's absolutely key. We sort of know that implicitly, but that was a very clear indicator, number one. Number two is about having a clear purpose. One of the things that I notice in leadership teams, which sets the good away from the mediocre, is that in these leadership teams, everybody's responsible for a function in the leadership team. Head of sales, head of supply chain, head of production, for example. And oftentimes they'll say to me, Dan, I wish people would just let me do my job. And I say, well, what does that mean? Well, just let me run supply chain. Just let me run the sales group. Yes, but you also have a foot in the leadership team. What are your obligations there? So highly effective teams also recognize that they have a higher purpose, higher than their function. So do we recognize and acknowledge that we have a purpose? And it's not just to push company profits. It's also, and the secret connection point here is the customer. Yeah. Is the customer the center of everything you do? That helps build on that. So I think that having a strong purpose is also valuable. And then thirdly, there's some structural issues. So do we have a good results-driven structure? Do we have a good communication system in the company? Do we have a process for making decisions? And do we have also a regular way of giving feedback to each other? And I would say those three things are it. It's about the resilient relationships, having a stronger, higher purpose above my function, and number three, having a results-driven structure.
Love it. And this is really kind of the type of, I suppose, this is the type of language that I love talking about, and it's so in tune with 2021 and moving forward as companies evolve, because I believe that business is going through evolution and the new ways of working in the digital world, but also just in for the future as well. I think it's going to stay as well. So I think that you.
Well, I mean, and that's why I wrote the book Executive Ownershift. I originally wrote that book simply because I wanted to consolidate the experiences of working with well over 100 leadership teams. I wanted to put that together and see where were the common patterns so that I would have a toolkit that I could use with future clients. That was the original purpose. Then the second thing I thought, probably some of the clients that I'm working with would like to have access to this, because some of the workshops run differently. I've done things in Asia and North America, but why not put it together so everybody can access that? And then I started thinking, well, what about companies that, don't know me and I'll never work with, but they'd still aspire to have a high performance team. So that was sort of the behind the book. And now I'm seeing a lot of consultants enjoy getting the book, a lot of coaches, because the majority of people are still focused on leadership as an individual endeavor. And I've written the book in such a way that it's very much focused around how do we build highly effective teams in small and large organizations, but in a very pragmatic way. So there are, short stories that describe a key learning point, and there's a lot of tools in that book. So even if you're, an individual entrepreneur aspiring to take your ideas to the next level, I think you'll find several accelerators in there that will help you become even more successful than you are today.
Love it. Very good. Excellent. Fantastic. Well, listen, John, John, bloody hell. Dan.
My brother's John. I got a brother named.
I think I was kind of, I was daydreaming, right? And I just had, obviously I was speaking to John Spence yesterday and we had some great conversations. And so
Adam, what you don't realize is I've been called John half of my life from my mother and father, who, God bless them, they're no longer here, but my younger brother's John. And it's kind of a fitting.
Isn't that just weird? That's just like kind of the universe kind of like hitting me in the face or something like that. But listen, Dan.
Good deja vu memory for me.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. Really good. First of all, I just want to say, guys, hope you've enjoyed today's particular show with Dan, because I think he's given you some great tips, some advice. And if you want to learn more about Dan, obviously, please make sure that you click on the links below. Check out his book, which is available on Amazon and all good sort of bookstores and stuff like that. Dan, I just want to say thank you so much for being on today's show. Really appreciate you.
My pleasure. Just a really honor to join you. I love your mission. I love what you're doing, Adam, and I'm pleased to be a part of your movement and what you're doing. Thank you.
Awesome. And guys, by the way, what I was going to say is if you do have any questions for Dan as well around team performance, leadership, or anything like that, anything that has resonated with you throughout today's show, please feel free to reach out to him. You can do so on LinkedIn or on his website. Just mention the Game Changers audio experience, and then he can kind of, tap two and two together. So from me and Dan, just want to say thanks very much. And I hope you've enjoyed today's show, and hopefully we'll see you again back here again. See you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Hey, you guys, I just want to say thank you so much for listening in to this episode of the Game Changers Experience. I hope that you got some amazing value, some great insights, and golden nuggets that you can implement into your business straight away. I would really, really appreciate it if you could leave a 5-star review on the button below. Have a fantastic day, and we'll see you on the next episode. Take care.